Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where every day I explore how technology is transforming our life, business, and even world, all while trying to bust a few myths along the way. For example, if I said to you, what do you know about Honeywell? I would imagine for most people listening, you might think of the thermostat on the wall, but today I want to take you on a journey beyond that and help you see the world a little bit differently. For example, in a COVID world where we're all focused on staying safe, have you ever thought about the buildings that you enter, whether that be your office, school, shopping mall? Because essentially, all these buildings are living and breathing, and they all rely on complex systems that all must work together to keep us safe. Much like the human body, all those systems need to work together. So if we look at HVAC, could be compared to the lungs, video analytics could be the eyes, artificial intelligence could be the brain and the nervous system of a building, and touchless access could be the motor system, and UV light sanitation, almost like the immune system. Intrigued? It certainly is a different way of looking at things, and today's conversation really opened up my eyes, and I invite you to come and join me in that conversation. So buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to Atlanta, where we're going to be speaking with Peter from Honeywell today about all of that, about how those systems need to work together inside buildings and so much more. So let's get Peter onto the show right now. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Peter. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name is Peter Fehl. I'm the president of Honeywell's building automation business. We do building automation in large and industrial type settings where we manage energy, we manage airflow across buildings, we manage lighting, we have access control, we also have ancillary systems like fire systems and those kinds of things. So we're really focused on sustainability, energy, and energy savings, as well as safety and security.
Awesome. And for people listening and hearing about Honeywell for the first time, can you tell them a little bit more about how at Honeywell you're focused on transforming the way the world works, and also how you're doing just that?
Yeah, I think most people know Honeywell probably harkens back to the thermostat that's on their wall at home. Yeah. Obviously, we're a much larger company than that. So we do everything from aerospace and making helicopter turbine engines to chemicals for green freons to productivity solutions. We're one of the biggest manufacturers of N95 masks. If you haven't caught some of the recent news, we have our second generation quantum computer that we've just released to the world, and have many large customers working on problems that haven't been able to be solved prior with our new computer. And then I work in what we call our building technology business. And as I mentioned, we're really focused on sustainability and energy optimization across hospitals, schools, large commercial buildings, airports. Even in different parts of the world, we work at a city level in terms of driving a lot of these technologies to help local and federal and state governments meet their challenges going forward. So it's a very broad and wide-based business.
And I'd missed that announcement about the quantum computing. That sounds incredibly cool.
Yeah, it's a very, very interesting field of study. The gentleman who runs it, Tony Utley, is a friend of mine, and he's explained to me how it works about a dozen times, and I'm still totally lost. But the key is it solves nonlinear problems. So it's very well tuned for things like, making molecules or determining how there's correlations between these very widespread sort of uncorrelated events that will find sort of how those things are connected over different parameters and time. And so it's a really unique solution. It's one of the things that we're very excited about.
Awesome. And one of the reasons I invited you on the podcast today was after hearing about so many schools out there all over the world seem to be stumped at the moment when it comes to how to make their buildings safe and are actually delaying an in-person return to a lot of those buildings. So can you tell me more about some of the challenges that you've seen?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the challenges for schools are many and varied. The first big one is that no two schools are alike. Here across the United States, for example, we have school buildings that go all the way back to the 1920s, don't have centralized air conditioning. We have, brand new schools that are built on, all of the new state-of-the-art technologies, and then everything in between. And so I think the challenge for school districts and for school administrators is really around how do they come up with a holistic solution for a very, very diverse portfolio of buildings and challenges. And then, schools are dynamic places. And so, the learning environment requires people to be together. It requires, the ability to communicate with the students without loud background noises and all of those other things that distract students from learning. And so you put all that together and it becomes a pretty complicated Rubik's Cube to solve.
And before you came on the podcast today, I was reading about how you were saying that schools actually need to take more of a holistic approach to allow that safer return to school. Is that something you can expand on?
Yeah, it's, as we look at it in our approach to how we work with different schools, it's really around a layered approach, as you said. It's about different policies and different procedures being additive in terms of the total effect that they have. So, as an example, temperature checks, masks, social distancing, airflow and ventilation, the policies that they have if they do have an infection or an outbreak in terms of what they do, both with the building and the students. And so, any one of those has some level of effect in terms of their ability to manage the COVID crisis that we're currently running through. But the more layers that they add, the more additive all of this becomes. And so as we look at schools, we're really trying to work actually all the way from the parents all the way back to the systems inside the school building. So, a lot of the conversations that we're having today really just start with helping educate the parents around what the technologies are, how they work, what's been deployed in the schools, and then getting them comfortable that those districts are creating safe environments for their children to go back to. And then that combined with many of the other things that I just mentioned really then start to create that safe environment for children to begin learning in person again.
And I was also reading about how approaching COVID-19 takes almost a Swiss cheese approach with layers of approaches and different systems that all need to work together, whether that be HVAC, video analytics, AI, frictionless access, and better sanitation. That list goes on and on. But can you tell me more about that? Because it's something that we don't get to talk about or hear enough about, in my opinion.
Yeah, a great example and one that I was just talking to one of our customers about the other day was, what is the policy? Let's say one of the school children is diagnosed with COVID and had been in school the prior day, or potentially comes in that day and ends up getting a fever in the middle of the day. So then the question is what is the procedure for the school at that particular point in time? And what we have been talking to them about is, right, so that classroom then needs to go home and be quarantined. They do temperature checks on the rest of the kids in the school at that particular point in time. We then tune the building to flush all the air out of the school and replace it as quickly as possible. And then as they continue to move forward, there's a next level of checks that they're doing on the students who are coming in. So in that scenario, you're looking at video analytics, you're looking at temperature checks, you're looking at, a ventilation workflow procedure in terms of how you want to flush the air out of that classroom or out of that wing of the school. Then you have some sort of policy going forward to make sure that any of the contacts that student had with other students, you're maintaining and monitoring that. And so it's not one answer to the problem. it's tying together multiple different systems and procedures in order to drive a very specific outcome, which is then making it safe for all of the students to come in the next day. And I guess I should add, then you also need to sanitize the room and make sure that you've cleaned all the surfaces and done all the sanitization in order to make sure that there's no virus left in the classroom as well. So again, it's a multi-step approach, and one particular part of that doesn't address the need that the schools have in terms of making sure that things are safe for the next day when the students come back.
And presumably then, if just one of those systems wasn't functioning properly, the health of a building is ultimately at risk, right?
Yes and no. I think what it does is it ultimately takes the effectiveness of that building to manage the risk down. The other systems are still there. They're still operating. They're still running. But as I mentioned, it's a multiplicative effect in terms of as you continue to add more and more systems. So you definitely lose some of the effectiveness, but generally, if you have enough of these systems in place, enough layers of the onion, you're still able to maintain and run that building until you can get those other systems back up and running the way they should be.
And I'm curious, do you have any stories that you could share around how you have helped school administrators address the holistic health needs of their schools? Because I'm sure you've got more than a few under your belt, especially this year.
Yeah, it's really around, like I said, starting from the parents and actually working our way all the way back to the actual systems that we manage and operate and deploy our technologies on. And there's a lot of information out there right now, and there's a lot of different bodies that are generating standards and guidelines between CDC, there's the WELS Healthy Building, there's ASHRAE, there's local and state governments that are also applying different standards. And so it's a very complicated patchwork of what's the recommendation, why is that recommendation being made, and then what are the technologies that help implement that recommendation. And so in a lot of the discussions that we've had, it's really starting with that parent group or those school boards and working our way backwards. And there's many, many different technologies that can fundamentally solve the same problem. So it's about this trade-off between, all of these schools are still operating under budgets and they still are constrained in terms of what their ability to go spend inside those schools are. And then, there's multiple technologies that potentially solve the same problem. And so what we do is we take almost like a checklist approach on where are all of the vulnerabilities inside an individual school, and then what are the right and appropriate technologies to apply on those parts of the school, and then pull it back together in terms of giving them a holistic solution. Buying things kind of one system at a time doesn't really make sense, especially for schools, because again, it's so dynamic. It's a living, breathing building with hundreds of children inside. And so no day is the same as the day before. And we take a lot of that into account as we're talking. But the first step really is just around education. Again, it's a bit of information overload. And what we try and do is boil it down to the basics around what the schools need to be focused on, and then how, that can help make the parents and more comfortable and the children safer.
And like I said a few moments ago, there have been many challenges this year. We don't need to go over that. We all know what they were. But one thing we can all celebrate is we're starting to think about 2021 and another year of opportunities and hopefully much better things on the horizon. But I'm curious, what excites you about the road ahead and how technology will help tackle some of the world's new challenges? Because it seems that we're heading somewhere very different, and that's how it feels right now. But what excites you about that?
Two things from my point of view. First one is our industry has been talking about air quality and air health for a very long time. And we've had sort of different levels of success in terms of educating the public about, how important air quality is, as an example, inside a building. So for better or for worse, I think COVID's really highlighted how important that is. And look, we'll get past COVID. There'll be a vaccine. We'll get there. It'll ultimately end up fading in the past. But what I don't think is going to fade into the past is this awareness around air quality. I mean, every year there's hundreds of thousands of students who are missing school because they catch the flu or the cold, and so all of those things are fundamentally the same problem that COVID is generating now. And we've had solutions for this for quite a while. It just hasn't been a top of mind topic for a lot of building owners around the world, school districts, hospitals. And so I think this conversation that we're having around COVID, even after COVID's gone, will continue. And I think that'll be good, because it kind of goes into point number 2, which is the focus going forward is really applying the technology around the individual in the building. Historically, we've looked at our industry really around how do we manage the building? How do we manage the concrete and the steel to be as energy efficient as possible, as comfortable as possible? What the conversation is now really shifting to is, what is that individual doing in that building? And then how do we make the building dynamic so that the building adapts to what the person wants? And I think that conversation is a good one. And it's bringing forward all kinds of new technology, new ways of thinking about things. And I think that, to me, is exciting, because it's going to lead to a bit of a revolution in our industry that'll be for the good. Buildings will adapt to people instead of people adapting to the buildings.
And what's next for Honeywell? Is there anything else you can share with us today? I appreciate you probably can't share too much, but is there anything you can?
Yeah, I think, again, we're looking much more holistically than we were prior, if I'm honest about it. I think our view on where our technologies can play and where we can bring health and safety and productivity and energy savings, I think, is a much broader view today than it was 12 months ago, right? And so we're really looking at how do we extend that patchwork of technology and know-how, because at the end of the day, my business in particular, the building automation system inside a building is fundamentally the brain of the building. It's where all of the subsystems come together, and ultimately we program in how all those systems relate to each other. And so we're in a very unique position to understand, by changing A, you get an output in B. And I think we've constrained ourselves in the past. So, as we look broader, we're certainly looking much more into sustainability, being able to manage ventilation, air quality, water quality, tying into sustainable energy like solar, geothermal, and broadening the way that we think about, rather than the building being the building and we manage everything inside, the building being part of a larger city grid or county grid that ultimately we also can help manage all of those pieces and parts. And so I think it's a pretty exciting future. We've got some of the best engineers in the world, and they are very diligently diving into all of this right now. And I would argue we're probably producing some of the best science around COVID that I've seen in terms of some of the studies that we've been publishing as of late.
And if anyone would like to stay in touch or find out more information about the road that you're taking next year, or even contact your team and continue the conversation we start today, what's the best starting point or best place to go to find all that information?
Yeah, sure. If anybody out there is interested in having a conversation, we'd love to do that. The best way is, Honeywell.com's website is the best landing spot. And then there's a buildings and cities tab off of that. And we've published all of our scientific studies are there. A lot of the case studies, especially around schools, hospitals, airports are included there. And then it's an easy way to get in touch with us. So if anybody does have any questions, please feel free, reach out, and we'd be more than happy to sit down and talk.
I must confess, before you came on the podcast today, my knowledge of Honeywell was that thermostat on the wall. And I think we've completely blown that away and seen the bigger picture today. And I think one of the things that I'll be taking away is these buildings are alive almost. And much like the human body, they all rely on a vast range of complex systems that must all work together to not only keep that building working, but keep people safe within it. It's a real eye-opener for me. So thanks so much, Peter, for coming on and sharing that with me today.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. I really appreciate it. I enjoyed the conversation.
Wow. Peter blew my mind there, enabled me to look beyond the thermostat and towards the holistic needs of schools and indeed buildings that we all walk around without even thinking about HVAC, video analytics, artificial intelligence, frictionless access, sanitation, all those things that we possibly take for granted. And Peter also left me wanting me to find out more about their other work too, especially quantum computing. So there is an open invitation to Peter and any of his team to come back on the podcast and help everyone listening understand a little bit more about how they're trying to transform the way the world works and reshape the future. But over to you. Any questions, insights, experiences, pictures to come on the show? Whatever it is, I am the easiest guy in the world to find. You get me on techblogwriter@outlook.com. My website is techblogwriter.co.uk, where you'll find over 1,400 interviews. You'll also find how you can work with me if you want me to manage your business blogs, ghostwrite articles for your leadership team, or, of course, help you launch your own podcast. Whatever it is, keep those messages coming through. And if none of that is of interest, have no fear. I will return same time, same place tomorrow, where we'll do it all again with another guest, where we will continue to navigate these uncharted digital waters and continue to learn how technology is transforming the way we live, work, and indeed our entire world. So all that's left for me to say is a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.